Good morning, everybody. Hello, and welcome to our webinar. Thank you all for joining us today. We know you're all webinared out and tired of all this online stuff, so we're really delighted that you took the time to spend with us today to talk a bit about online in Europe. So that's websites and online marketing in Europe and how you can use virtual tools, digital tools to grow your business and your exports in Europe. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Just while the last of you are logging on and such, let me get my mouse to work properly. And here we go. Just perhaps start by introducing ourselves. So my name is Susanna. I'm Chief Content Officer at IBT Online. Delighted to be here with you today. So I get involved in everything that involves the content aspect of websites, of keywords, of images, things like that. And I'm really, really delighted to be joined today by our Senior Online Marketing Manager, Joelle Lazzarato. You're probably, she's probably known to many of you already as a real star on the online marketing world, with a huge range of knowledge of the international markets. So Joelle is going to help me talk a little bit about European online marketing and the specific nature of it, how it is very different from other markets, and what are the best practices there. A very quick word on IBT Online in particular, since there's some of you who are new here for us. So IBT Online, we're a U.S. company. And we are really proud that we just won the President's E Award. That's in recognition of a company that can receive for making a significant contribution to the expansion of U.S. exports. And what we do, we're focused on the small and mid-cap world, and we're focused absolutely on building websites and online marketing for them globally. So international websites, international online marketing. For that. And as part of that, we have a series of what we call online global programs that are that we work with, and we're very, very proud to be working with several states across the United States, all the ones in yellow on your screen. And these are states that have agreed online global programs with us. And we'll talk a bit about these because for many of them, there are actual grants available to help you with the cost of building websites and online marketing. So we will talk about those as well. But if you want to circle back and if you want to have more information, just let us know. We can tell you where to get the information, particularly about the grants and how that works and so on. And in essence, there are three types of, basically three programs that we're running with these US states. There's option A, which is basically building 2 websites anywhere in the world. They can be, Saudi Arabia and China, Germany and Mexico, wherever it is you want. And they're fully localized, great little websites, but with a very predefined scope. Option B is anything that doesn't fit option A. It's like, no, I want a huge website, or I want an e-commerce website, or I want, it's got to be integrated with this, that, and the other. And option C is for online marketing. As I said, there are grants available for these online global programs in many, many US states. So we'll talk a bit about that as we go through our agenda today. And the agenda today is really going to be focused on Europe. As I said, I'm going to start with a big brush approach of Europe online, what that means, the penetration rates of internet, the type, and then I'm going to focus in on the 3 largest major markets, Germany, France, UK. It has implications as well for some of the other markets around it, and then we're going to look at best practice European websites. What makes a great European website? What do you need to actually ensure that your website is seen to be really effective across Europe? And Joelle's also going to talk about the same for online marketing. So online marketing in Europe, what does it look like? How do you define it? What are the main drivers for it? And then we'll circle back with some action points, takeaways, and please also dedicate some time for Q&A at the end. please drop us some questions in the chat box. We're always happy to engage in discussions. After all, we're all now online, so we're used to these webinars and how they all function. No one be shy. Okay, and with that, I'm going to start just talking and giving a little bit of an overview of Europe Online, what it all looks like, and so on. I want to give this big picture first, and this comes from January 2020, so it really reflects up to 2019, and it is I'd say it's more than just the EU. Obviously, it's 850 million people, so they're including parts of non-EU countries and things. But I think what's interesting is a couple of major things stick out, and you're going to find this again and again when we look at the individual countries as well. Very high mobile phone connection rates. So there's something like 30% more mobile phone connections than there are people. And a lot of the countries in Europe, particularly Southern Europe, but also throughout Europe, very high mobile phone connection rates and very high use of phones as well. Also, very high internet user penetration rates. 84% across Europe are online, and online in Europe pretty well 7 hours a day. So that is, it's an average, but 700 million people across Europe are spending 7 hours a day online. And most of them are using social media as well. And this is good news. This is good news for you as an exporter. And I think it's important news as well as we head into 2021 after this year of 2020, the year that wasn't. When you start to say, how am I going to connect? How am I going to, we're not all out of it yet. We're not all vaccinated yet. How are we going to connect going forward? Yes, trade shows will happen again. Yes, we'll all get back onto airplanes. But in the meantime, I think we've also changed a little bit the way we work. We're all at home. And I need to get sure that my online tools are really lined up. And this is good news. You know where your prospects are. You know where your clients are. You know where your competitors are. And even your future employees, they're all online, and you can reach them. So that's I think worth having in the back of your mind when you're looking at some of these things in terms of decisions for business decisions in 2021. I wanted to say, that's not worked out well. Sorry about that. I wanted to say also Europe e-commerce, large, growing, and highly mobile, I think is how you'd sum it up. So we talked about. It is large. The United Kingdom really pulls up everything because it's so higher than everybody else. It's the fourth largest e-commerce country in the world. That's the nation of shoppers. And we'll drill down into some of the other ones as well. But overall, Western Europe has something in the region of 80% 80% penetration rate of e-commerce. I also wanted to highlight that obviously all the global players are here, from Amazon, Alibaba, Rakuten, and so on. But there are very, very, very strong local regional players across Europe. The one that you might have heard of already is Zalando, and that's very much B2C. It's a German company. But there are big B2B platforms as well in Europe. So if you are thinking of an e-commerce strategy, look at some of the European ones, the regional players. They may actually have some very good solutions for you and have, in fact, a deeper penetration rate in the individual countries rather than a global one like a sort of big Amazon or something. Just to sort of highlight on 2020, we don't have all the numbers yet coming through on 2020, but as a whole, e-commerce is up in almost all markets by about 30%, and it's not slowing down yet. It will start slowing down, I think, certainly in terms of percentage increases. But I think the bulk of it will stay. People who've learned shopping habits will keep them in 2021 and beyond. And if we look, just in terms of the share of population that shopped online over the last 12 months, again, this is 2019. It's all increased very much. The Nordics and the UK and the Nordic countries really pop above the rest. The average in Europe is about 60%. I think that's probably risen to 65% during 2020. But in countries like, the Scandinavians, it's all up at 80%. So, a very, very highly developed e-commerce market. And I wanted to also touch upon this sort of B2B side. B2B stats are harder to get, but when we're looking at the B2B side, we can see a couple of major trends. 3/4 of B2B buyers research things before they buy them. And they'll research them online, significantly for that. Manufacturers, we were looking at big surveys done across the EU, and manufacturers acknowledging that customer behaviors are very much changing. More and more purchasing are going online, and all processes of that, or all steps of that process, are also online, from the gathering information to the actual purchase. So it's not just for the B2C in Europe. I wanted to highlight as well, before we go down into the countries, pretty well for the rest of this webinar, we will be talking about the European Union plus the UK. We won't be talking about this bigger Europe, which involves other countries, like parts of Turkey, perhaps, or Albania. So most of the rest of the stats we're talking about is the EU. We're talking about sort of France, Germany, and the EU countries. Overall, that's a $15.5 trillion economy with 27 countries. The 86% of the population are online. So, a very, very good place for your online tools for websites and online marketing, a very developed market. Let's drill down now and talk about the three major European markets. The three largest European markets. I mean, the biggest overall is Germany. And it's really, I wanted to highlight a couple of things which come through as you're doing online tools. When you're thinking about online tools for Germany, there's a couple of characteristics that come through in it. First of all, it's got the largest population in Europe. I know that, and it's divided up into these lands, the Länder across, and there are quite significant differences between Bayern or Schleswig-Holstein. Quite significant differences between the north and the south. With Bayern very much more like sort of feeling like in Austria. Schleswig-Holstein feels very much like a Denmark. Obviously, it's pulled that way. GDP, we all know that Germany is number 4 in the world and is an absolute export dynamo. Even in 2020, it really they continued on the export side and continued to make that really soften the blow of lockdown for the countries they were still able to export to markets. In terms of the online world, when we're looking at them, I think when we talk about that 83 million people, that's 83 million within Germany. But a website, it's interesting because it actually goes beyond the Germany as such, and you can actually hit something like maybe 100 million people. So that's a pretty hefty website to have. 100 million people with one website, because it touches into all the German speakers. You can make it so that it's very much a German-speaking website rather than only sort of a geographically limited to Germany. So you're touching into Austria, obviously, also parts of Switzerland, but also little parts of the Czech Republic. Even Belgium has little pockets of German speakers. So we reckon that's up to about 100 million people. So worth thinking about when you're looking at your German website. And in terms of social media, we talked about the number of people on the internet. It's still growing well, and social media is growing very strongly too, up 6.5% in 2019, and our first indications are that it's about up 7.5% to 8% in 2020. Number of internet users also up strongly, something like +4% in 2020, as far as we can see. But internet and social media use in Germany is quite distinct. You'll see that in terms of the platforms they use messaging apps like WhatsApp, very strong on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, things like Twitter, Snapchat, Twitch, no, not really. You know, and it actually curves down a lot once you get past Facebook. You know, Facebook Messenger and Instagram, and then the rest curves right down to sort of in the 20% and hard to reach. So the big ones really to keep in mind: YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp as the messaging app. These are generalizations. A couple of big generalizations here. Germans do not like necessarily to engage in social media. Doesn't mean that you can't sell or that they can't get reactions, and we'll have some examples for you on that. But they're discreet, you know, and they respect each other's privacy. They do not like to share personal information. They are very, very aware of regulatory compliance. They are the main drivers of the GDPR, which we'll get to in a moment. But while they dislike all that sharing and stuff, they will leave reviews. And the reviews can be very pointed, so expect them to leave reviews. Expect to be able to answer those reviews as well. And generally, in terms of the websites, as a generalization, the best websites in Germany are in German. After all, this is a big, large market. They don't need to search very far out of their own comfort zone to find what they need. This is not like some tiny little country which, no, they've got a German competitor. They've got a German supplier of whatever it is they're looking for. They have German choices. So not that many of them bothered to go and look in French or Chinese or on American websites, for example. They'll look on German websites. And it's really important to find the right keywords in Germany. Keywords are very vital for that. It's also absolutely essential to be regulatory compliant. And I'll talk about GDPR in a second. But even Germany has an extra layer of regulatory compliance called Impressum. A German website that did not have cookie policy, privacy policy, Impressum, and the full GDPR would simply not give confidence, and Germans would notice it and move away. And then the last thing I wanted to point out was that Germans like to have a lot of content. They like to have, they'll click on yes, they'll read more information, download that PDF, they'll do it again and again, and they'll want the full information packet for that. A little tiny challenge about German websites is that sometimes they like their compound words, they put words together, so the words get very, very, very long, which gives you a problem in terms of your design. There's some solutions to that though, but there's a funny example for you at the bottom of the slide. United Kingdom has a very different feel, look, and ring to it on their websites. First, in terms of their place in the world, obviously the number 3 in Europe in terms of size, in terms of population. They're now no longer part of the EU, and I would suggest still trying really to refine their identity. They have some even internal issues between Scotland and the rest. So they're trying to find their place in the world or refine the place in the world. But on the online world, they kick above their weight. Why? Because of the use of English. And also, I think English culture, sort of pop, rock and roll music, English media, films, and so on. So English and England as a whole, well, English websites do punch above their weight. And worth having a look at that. For that. When I mentioned as well, they're sort of, GDP, they're second in Europe. I think that's now changed because of currency, but they're right up there on the same level as France. The table on the bottom, just about English language, the table at the bottom is quite interesting. It just says, the number of countries that recognize English as an official language, 63. Some of those are very tiny islands, but still, a lot of people do speak English at least as a second language. So that's why the English websites can also punch above their weight. Online, we said, there's a population of 67 million people. very urbanized, and again, more mobile phone connections than people, which is something that, and then in terms of internet penetration rate, one of the highest, very, very high level, one of the highest in the world at 96%. Social media lagging that a bit, but certainly 2020 pushed that up, and it's still growing fast in terms of social media growing quite significantly in the UK still. So this is a very, very plugged in economy. One of the big characteristics also about the UK, which I mentioned already, is its strength in e-commerce. A nation of shoppers, really. E-commerce is, I think that, yeah, the UK is number 4 in the world after China, the US, and Japan. Then comes the UK, and definitely the strongest in Europe in terms of e-commerce side. Strangely, they don't have that many national champions. So, for example, if you're looking at a European champion of retail e-commerce, it's a German company. A European champion of the electronics, it's a French company. So another one of sports, it's also a French company. So that's interesting that they don't have a specific one for the UK, but they have a very active online e-commerce market. France. Now, France, obviously the single largest country in Europe, 67 million people, number 2 after Germany, tied with the UK in terms of size. A very large country with all these different borders stretching from the Mediterranean to the North Sea, from the Alps to the Atlantic Ocean. From our point of view as well, websites there often are used as a gateway to North Africa, West Africa, the Mediterranean basin. And we see a lot of people saying, okay, I'm going to build a French website in order to develop my business as well in parts of for example, North Africa or West Africa as well. Online, a very active population, 89% on internet penetration rates, and a high level of social media as well. We'll see, again, same thing as we saw in other countries, mobile phone connections equal to the population or slightly above as well. E-commerce growing fast and with some very strong players there, so worth watching if you're interested in the e-commerce side for France. And what I think is interesting is, what makes a great French website is it's in French. The French do not like particularly, they're pretty chauvinistic about their language, they do not particularly like going out of their comfort zone. They have one of the least active cross-border e-commerce markets in Europe. They are very, very strong users of YouTube. That's across all of Europe, but France does stick out as a particular strong one. They want and look for French references as well, French testimonials, French references, and then how does that apply to me in France thing on their websites. And they want to have strong social media on it. So that sort of rounds up our big brush picture. I'm now going to talk about best practice European websites in more detail. Before I do, I'm going to launch a poll. I'm going to ask you if you're already doing business in Europe. And if so, are you already doing business in Europe? Are you doing business online with a market partner? Are you thinking about it still? Are you looking around? Are you online only? Let us know. An in-market partner can be a distributor, an agent, or a subsidiary. Can be your company. Are you already active in Thank you very most of you have voted. Thank you very, very much indeed. I'm going to give you some feedback on that. I'd say about 30% of you, a big third, are still thinking about doing business in Europe. But the biggest by far is yes via in-market partners. And the smallest by far is yes online only. So good. Thank you very much for that. I'm going to close that poll. And now we're going to talk a little bit about best practice European websites, what that means, what that brings you. Hold on. Here we go. So best practice European websites. I guess the first question to ask is, why do I need a European website? to get to Europe? Why can't I just use my US website to go to Europe? And the reason is because search engines don't work that way. Search engines organize the web. So you have to make sure that Google likes you. And Google has by far the dominant share in Europe. So, it's Google the one that you've got to please. So Google looks through about its algorithm looks through about 2 billion data points per second. So you put something in like, best pizza in Boston, and it'll look through 2 billion bytes of information within a second to try and find you the best pizza around your neighborhood. And it'll rank that information according to you, the searcher, according to where you are, according to your language, according to your preferences, the words you use, and so on. So if you have a US website and you're trying to attract Germans, Google will say, you're not relevant. Even if you're in German, even if you stick some German pages on, you're not relevant. Why? Because you're not hosted in Germany, you don't have the regulatory requirements of Germany, you don't have the right keywords, and I can tell that you're a US website. You're way down the list. So search engines are localized. So when we talk about a localized website, we talk about one that is relevant for that locality. And I'm going to give you a funny example because we're all working at home at the moment. And my dog's about to bark. So let's say I'm in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and let's say I'm in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I want to give my dog a toy so it doesn't bark all the time during webinars. So I go to google.com, which is my Google, and I look out Squeakless Dog Toy, and I get chewy.com, freedompullharness.com, amazon.com. Let's say I'm in London, and I go to google.co.uk, which is the British Google, the Google in the UK. You get barksandbunnies.co.uk, timeforpause.co.uk, amazon.co.uk. Barks and Bunnies is not relevant for someone sitting in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Chewy.com is not relevant for someone sitting in, not just because I don't sell there, but because the keywords aren't the same. The top level domains aren't the same, and so on. There's a neat little trick you can do if you're ever looking for it. How to tell if your website is actually localized. Here's something you can do. This is a report. We built a website for a client who wanted an Australian website. So it's in English, but it's in Australia. It's targeting the Australian market. So if it's targeting the Australian market, we want people to come there from Australia. And indeed, out of all the people who come from that market, 90% come from Australia. And then if you include New Zealand, it's like 95% come from Australia and New Zealand. So the website functions for Australia and New Zealand. The rest is just nothing. I mean, India, 37 people, nothing. So it's really, that's how you can tell if your website is actually functioning for its right market. The website functions per market in that way. And if you like, we put on one slide the 10 criterion that we have for localization. So there's 10 criteria that we recognize as main characteristics of a localized website. You'll note that language is one criteria out of the 10. The rest is all about content management and hosting and domain names and other things like that. So building a localized website it has quite a lot of aspects to it. One of the main things you're going to look at in Europe are domain names. Domain names, this is, for example, a company, you can see at the top there, I don't know if it's a bit small perhaps. Here at the top it says wdm.co.uk. This company is targeting the UK market. And its picture there is of British trucks driving on the wrong side of the road with British license plates. And the spelling is in English, but the domain name is clearly wdm.co.uk, is referencing the UK market. This company here, ASG Inc., is targeting the French market. Not only is it in French, the domain name asginc.fr is signaling to Google that it is a French website. Here you have an American company targeting the German market. So again, not only is it in German, but right away Google knows, Google's algorithm says German because it's got the right domain name. The last one that you could have is a .eu. Now that's something that's quite interesting. If you're not quite sure where you want to be in Europe, and you say, I want to know something that covers all of the EU, then you might want an EU. .eu. That covers all. It tells Google that you're all of EU, and then it depends on which language you choose after that. So that's an interesting option as well for domain names. So it's one of the key things you want to get right on your European websites. Now, one of the next key things that you want to get right is to make sure that you are digitally compliant. That means GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation. This came in force in May 2018 and rolled out since. It is absolutely solid in across Europe now. And in fact, if you are not GDPR compliant in terms of privacy, in terms of SSL certificates, in terms of those sort of things, Google actually puts a little warning sign if you're seen from Europe saying this is not a secure site. That can be good for your brand image, put it mildly. Can you transfer data outside the EU if you're not GDPR compliant? The answer is no. If you're a US company and you are selling to Europeans, you have to be GDPR compliant. If you want to know more about that, let us know. We have lots of information about it. The key thing that you want to know is think of it in a positive way. There's now one single set of rules for all of the EU. So one set of rules for all of the EU. That's simpler than what it used to be. And it basically is about compliance, giving control of the data to EU citizens for that. And there are sanctions for non-compliance. And yes, it does apply outside the EU. So beware of compliance in Europe. Couple of examples of online compliance. Sorry, this slide is rather colorful. At the top, you'll see there's a Datenschutzerklärung, which is a privacy policy, a cookies, and then something called an impressum. There are cookies pop-up boxes as well. Here you have a German and a French version, and those are opt-in. They're not opt-out. So it's not if you don't sign this, then we agree. No, you have to actually physically tick the box. But these are now known throughout the rest of the world as well. And I think that this is something that we're moving towards globally. Your cookie and privacy policy has to have all details as well. So that's the sort of the key areas that I want to talk about for websites across Europe. I'm going to turn now to Joelle, talk a little bit about the online marketing side. Joelle?
That's great. Thank you very much, Susanna, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Perfect. So looking at best practices to really market your brand, your business, and really gain some traction in Europe. First thing first is really you need to look at your ideal corporate profile, and this will then help you define your buyer persona. So here's your buyer persona. By definition is a semi-fictional representation of your ideal customer, which is based on market research, but also real data about your existing customers that you already have. So that's the good news. A buyer persona is, however, not the same as the ideal customer profile, which is more like a big category. You need to go a little bit deeper to, identify some subcategories. Your customer profile and buyer personas are different, but they're absolutely interlinked. So you could have an ideal corporate profile that has a few personas within it, and then your marketing team can then create content for, and your sales team will then feel comfortable speaking to all of these different personas. So just to give an example, let's take a B2B in advanced manufacturing. The CEO takes the ultimate decision, but this is based on his line-specific engineer, the head of sales and marketing, research analyst. Each of them have their own problem. And if you're in B2B sales, your ideal customer profile will define which companies are a good fit for you. but your buyer persona will then define who all of these people in the decision-making process have to speak to. So who you'll need to work with to get to the final decision that the CEO will sign off within that company that you have identified. What's important for a market that is so fragmented in terms of different markets, different languages, especially Europe, each persona fits in the ideal customer profile, but each persona will have specific questions, concerns, roles, and each persona is different and will require a different approach from a marketing perspective. And also remember, your buyer persona will change over time, and your European personas will be different to your domestic personas. They might not be totally different, but they will have different pain points and research in different ways. So what's important to note, however, is how your European persona will not only differ from your domestic personas, but they'll differ amongst each other. So unfortunately, having one European persona is quite unlikely, and that's the bad news. But on this slide, really, we just wanted to show you a few examples of questions you should ask yourself. You know, are there multiple buyer personas for my export markets? Are there multiple personas within the same markets? How do they find me? What do they care about? And here we just wanted to bring an example from L'Oreal, which is a frequently cited company for how spot on they are with the international marketing. So if you look at this picture here and the text, this is L'Oreal assuring US stylists, and this was maybe a few months back when you know, COVID was still a big concern. It still is, but it was everyone was getting used to the new way of working. And here we have L'Oreal assuring the US-based stylists that they're trying to support them while we're socially distancing, and the majority of stylists were still closed. In the next image in Australia, the message was totally different. So there was no mention of COVID, but instead focused on the climate. And this was most likely due to the horrible fires Australia suffered about a year ago, and are still really trying to recover and putting strong emphasis on how the country has reacted and what really matters to them still now. And in the last example, we had L'Oreal really demonstrating to the Brazilian consumers in this case that they're still doing their part to help the people of Brazil by producing hand sanitizer, which is a product they wouldn't normally produce, but it really reacted. They understood what the buyer persona in Brazil were, what they needed, what the problem was, and they've really reacted to help them solve it. And then obviously that benefited their brands and their bottom line, I would assume. So this just to demonstrate that each buyer persona is clearly different, and your messaging has to be respectful of that. As we talk about buyer persona, another thing that's very important to consider is the buyer journey and how it is differ. So in general, your buyer's journeys can be broken down to 3 stages: the awareness stage, the consideration stage, and your decision stage. And when designing your marketing strategy, it's very, very important that you take into account what content you will create, share, and promote with your buyer persona for each of the 3 stages of the journey. And remember, the content doesn't have to directly tie back to one of your products or services necessarily. Your audience will appreciate the helpful information, but more importantly, they'll quickly embrace a relationship with your brand. When it comes time to make a purchase, you'll be top of mind because you've been helpful, you're a trusted partner, and they're ready to do business with you. So just as different topics work for the 3 stages of your customer journey, so does the type of contents your audience like to use. So when you get to know your buyer persona, it will be a lot easier to understand what content is right for them at each of the 3 stages. Susanna mentioned search engine optimization or search engines across Europe, how they're different. And absolutely, we also have dedicated webinars where we talk about SEO and how is it important to really reach people through their own specific search engine in the market. And this just for me on a marketing, from a marketing perspective, to highlight again that Google has at least 90% of the market share across all of Europe. And here you see, for example, Google for Germany, Google for Hungary, the UK, the Netherlands, and Greece. No matter which search engine or where you are, it is localized and searcher-centric. And this is really important when designing your marketing strategy. Make sure that you are on the right search engine where your buyer persona and your prospects are. And now linked to that, okay, before you get started designing and launching your international marketing, you have your persona, you know what content you want to share, you've understood them. Make sure that you follow the last crucial step, do your keyword research. So this is just a quick example of what we're doing, and periodically reviewing, unfortunately, is not one thing that you can do and then forget about. Your keyword research is, well, key. So in this case, we have an example of how the same word, you know, in English, we have the word train, but in Portuguese, if you were running your campaigns in Brazil, you would want to use the term trem, as that would give you 95% of the searches, as the Brazilian users use that specific keyword. Whereas if you're now entering Europe and you're targeting Portugal, you need to be careful just transposing your Brazilian ads or your Brazilian content to your Portuguese audiences, because if you were to continue using trem, you'd really just reach 2% of the Portuguese in Portugal. So you really want to go and use the word comboio. So this is vital for search engine advertising, and you need to make sure you're using the same language and exactly the same language as your target audience is using. If you want to rank high, be competitive and be found. But this is also paramount for any other content you create. And with content, I also include social media posts, for example. So that short snippet of text that you have on your newsfeed or on your customers or prospects newsfeed really is all they have to make the decision, maybe even unconsciously, on whether they will want to engage with it or not. So as we mentioned before, using native-like language will help in building brand trust, as your content will feel local, relevant, genuine, creating a really good user experience for them. And by creating, as I call it, native-like experiences, you can also increase engagement and boost, as we call, brand lift or trust. As the user won't think about your post as being spam or being an ad, they'll just see it and maybe even unconsciously engage with it because that's the language they would use. And again, just to reiterate, we have done a whole webinar on this. There is a recording available for free on our website. So if you want to know a little bit more about search engine advertising and search engine optimization, go and check it out. But just wanted to showcase here again another example of how buyer personas across Europe are going to be different. So even if you're doing similar marketing campaigns across different European markets, nonetheless, you do need to tweak them a little bit to the appropriate audiences. So in this example, we were creating some social media campaign to promote blog content that we'd created for Bullman products in the UK and in Germany. And we had our buyer persona narrowed down quite finely. So we want to reach primary school teachers who are looking to engage their kids over the Easter period. So our campaign objectives here were to increase brand awareness for Bullman products, but also to build pixel and data for us and remarket for our buyer persona. And we used content to drive top funnel traffic to the blog, allowing us to then promote some more products to them. But what we found here is that the campaign in Germany was a lot larger than in the UK. And this is because in Germany, Easter is a really big deal, is a really big important time of the year. So we dedicated a lot more time and resources to that campaign compared to the UK, and we got really good results for it. Another example here again using Facebook as a platform. This just to show how important it is to really fully understand your buyer persona and what the journey looks like in each of your target market. So here is an example of a campaign we run where we're promoting same content, a blog post in this case, with similar images and messages, although absolutely, of course, localized and staying relevant to a local audience. But if we look at the results for this specific post, for the UK, we had roughly 1,200 engagements, and we saw that we were pretty pleased with that. But then we reviewed our Mexico campaigns engagements, and wow, 20,000 and counting. So if we stop our analysis at this, we could quite simply infer that our campaigns in Mexico worked much better than they did in the UK, right? That is not necessarily the case. If we take a look a little bit deeper, and here we have the same company, but looking at the Facebook posting results over a year and comparing again Mexico with the UK. So we said there was a lot more engagement from Mexico, and you can see this in the blue and red bars where we see sessions and users that we brought back to the website. But then engagement here is measured as the number of times someone clicked on it, shared the posting, and that's important for the long-term brand awareness, bringing people back to the website and engaging them. But what about lead generation and return on investment? If we look closer, we can see that the UK and Mexico are much more similar. So if we look at the yellow and the green bars here, this really reflects how many people engaged with a form that we want them to submit, or they've taken action to go out and find the distributors to then purchase the product. So you can see here that a Mexican buyer persona engages more easily with the post and on the website than the British public. But lead generation or actual sales and outreach to the distributor is about the same. So the buyer persona of the two markets react differently. And this is just to prove that you don't stop to look at the first data, learn your buyer persona, get to know them and how they engage, and this will give you the full picture and really allow you to better gauge the results of your marketing campaigns.
Joelle, thank you so much for that. Okay, well, let's circle back now and figure out some action points, takeaways, and Q&A. And I wanted to thank the questions that are starting to come in as well. We'll get to them as well. Thank you very much. So we've talked a bit about Europe as a whole. We've given you some quick landscape pictures of individual countries, the 3 largest countries. We looked at European best practice websites, from domain names to compliance, like that. The localization of websites as well, through the localizing and what that means. We looked at online marketing, localizing the online marketing, and the differences between different markets, and the how to track your and find your buyer persona and identifying your buyer persona and the buyer's journey in all these different markets. So let's now circle back as well. We said at the beginning that we had these online global programs across various US states, and sort of to remind you some of the largest ones. Option A is for 1 or 2 markets, that sort of thing. Option B, option E is for e-commerce. And to look at some of the examples in terms of option A and B. What we call option A and B. That's basically websites, localization of websites, either for 2 markets or for several markets. I want to give you some examples. Okay, these ones happen to be in Mexican and Chinese, or Japanese, but Chinese. But just to give you some examples of how important it is as well to make sure there's a brand consistency and what those companies did with the websites, which I think is interesting. In each case, it's really trying to move the top line. So it's about lead generation, brand awareness, building sales, growing your exports in particular. So, for example, we've mentioned Bullman once or twice in the example that Joelle gave on that. Here's the Bullman products. They have several international websites. The key for them is driving business to their distributors. So they are generating leads for their distributors. And one of the points about it, the challenge they wanted was to have a website that generated leads for their distributors, but at the same time allowed them access and visibility to their end clients. So that was paramount, and that's why the websites are built in a certain way for that. So that's sort of an example of how a company can use international websites, even if they're small. They don't have to be huge websites. They can be very distinct websites, but they generate leads for their local distributors and allow visibility on the end client. And there's Anne giving some testimonials if you want on our website on that. Another point is just when you start looking at saying, I need a complete reworking of the website, both perhaps domestically and also perhaps internationally. Internationally, it doesn't work for whatever reasons. We need to integrate certain CRM parts, or we're looking at integrating it to different content and CMSs. So again, that can mean your international one has to have some consistency with the brand, but it can be quite a different functioning website for that. So those are often something we find is that someone has a US website. It can be very, very large and very different, and they want something that resembles it but might have very different functionality because their route to market in different markets internationally is not the same as domestically for that. E-commerce as well. It's very often companies say, okay, we might be having some e-commerce functionality. We want a different type of e-commerce functionality across our international markets. It's a very specific market. In this case, it's sort of going in the UK and then also in China. These are very different markets from our US market. We want to build them slightly differently, different SKUs, different products to put there, so we can cut and paste, sort of, cut to form the right products and SKUs in these local markets for that. Before I go much further, I wanted to ask if anybody has an interest in looking at these. Where am I going here? Here we go. That's it. My poll. Sorry. I want to launch this poll. I wanted to ask if anyone has an interest in learning more about these types of programs, about the grants that are available, about the websites. If you'd like to learn more about website localization and what we can do for you on international markets or in the US market, please let us know, and we'd be very happy to jump back at you and circle back and have some chat with you about that. And again, that can be about e-commerce or public redesign or these very defined ones. And there are grants available in many of the US states. All right, I'm going to close that poll. Thank you very, very much indeed. Very much appreciated on that. Appreciated about that. I'm going to close that one. And then just also going to some of the other services and talking more about what Joelle was saying. We also have this option C, as it's called, which is about online marketing. And here, whether it's in France or in Saudi Arabia, online marketing, anything from search engine marketing, social media marketing, reporting and analytics that go with it. And again, I would like to ask if anybody has an interest in this, that they could let us know. And my mouse seems to be tired today. Sorry about that. It's webinared out as well. If you have an interest and would like to know more about the international marketing, online marketing, and some of the grants that are available for that, let us know on that as well. Thank you very much for that very enthusiastic response from so many of you. That was lovely. Great to see. Okay, I'm going to close that poll as well. Here we go. Close that poll. And moving on then. So just sort of in summary, really, just in summary, before we get to the Q&A. In summary, from our point of view, we think that online tools will become more important for companies, and they are within the reach of all companies now. In the beginning, even 10 years ago, it was really just the huge companies that had localized websites and online marketing. Now, really, mid-caps, you all need to have effective, efficient, and localized online tools for your businesses, domestically and certainly internationally, that allow you to get found, be understood, do business. And it's all about the top line growth. Other point, Europe is online. It's very much online, very actively so. Typically Europe, a little bit sort of each market, but it is a very rewarding market to get it right. It is a terrific way to engage with European prospects, your European prospective buyers on the website, that they understand you better, that they feel that you're committed to them, that you build the trust that's needed in the buyer's journey in order to have the lead generation and the sales that go through. So in terms of next steps, check out our webinars, sign up for them. We'd love to have you here and engage and talk with things, and let us know if you have particular questions that you want to discuss. And then also get your teams together, get your sales and marketing team together and say, what's happening with our online tools? Do we need help here? Should we look at them, how we can optimize them, how we can localize them? How we get this right? Is this right for your company? Are the online global programs right for your company? If so, if there's anything we can do in terms of website localization and online marketing, let us know. With that, I'm going to open up to questions. We've got a few minutes left, and there have been some questions. I want to thank also Joelle for a great presentation before we start the questions. But Joelle, here's a couple of questions for you. There's someone who says, we have international distributors who do all of our online marketing. How can we check to see if they're doing it right? And should they be doing it? I would add, Joelle.
Thank you, Susanna. That's a very good question. It's something that we is not unusual. It is easier to hand over to someone that is in the country and they could do it for you. But we would always recommend try and keep control of your marketing efforts. After all, is controlling your brand, how everything is portrayed, is your online presence, is your real estate. If you can try and don't say take it away from them. They are in market. They know your buyer persona. They understand what they want to hear from you, but make sure that you have control over it, whether it is taking it in house and working with them or having some processes in place. We always feel that distributors are fantastic helping hand on the market to understand what your buyer persona wants, who they are, and how to engage with them. But try and keep have as much control as you can over your brand and the way your brand is portrayed in the different markets.
Great. Joelle, here's another one for you. Hi, we are a B2B company. Should we look further at LinkedIn, and is LinkedIn good in Europe?
Absolutely. If you have done any marketing through, for example, Facebook, LinkedIn is more of a premium platform, is a little bit more expensive, but for B2B is paramount to make sure that you can reach the people that matter, the people that are in the right industry. So LinkedIn is very well established in Europe, is a really good market for it. And LinkedIn is definitely moving from that job search and networking to very much a business-minded source of information, source of news kind of platform. So I would definitely go with LinkedIn.
Okay. Question, I guess, for me, which is, can you help us get domain names in Europe? The answer is yes. We would always ask that you buy them. That way you own them. It's better than, we don't want to own your domain names. You should own your domain names everywhere. They're your online real estate. You shouldn't give them away. There are a couple of markets where it's a little bit harder to buy them. We can help you in most of those markets, or if not, we have ways around. So yes, we can help you with your international domain names, especially the ones in Europe. That's another question. You said you need to host optimally as well. Does that mean hosting in Europe? For our point of view, Google certainly judges where you're hosted as a major attribute of a localized website, of being locally relevant. For some markets, for example, you won't even be shown if you're not hosted in that market. All our websites that we build are hosted optimally. So for example, if we're building something in Europe, it's hosted in Europe. That being said, these are huge mega companies, many of them actually American. Amazon Cloud, for example, has a very dense network across Europe that we use. There's lots of other questions about, Joelle, do we help with keyword research?
Absolutely. Keyword research is something, as I said, unfortunately, you cannot do it once and then forget about it. Ideally, you want to do it once a quarter, once every 6 months. So as part of the both the localization of the website, but also the online marketing program will then help and keep a very close eye on the SEO and the keyword research for the different markets.
Yeah. Okay. We're slightly running out of time, and some of the other questions coming through are very, very specific to the end client. I want to keep us under an hour because we're, Zoom and webinar and all too much online. I want to thank Joelle for helping me out today. Thank you very much. And then most of all, I want to thank all of you for attending, for taking the time out of your day, spend it with us. And yes, you will all be getting a recording of this in your inbox in about 2 days' time or 1 day's time. Thank you all so much. We wish you all to be safe, happy, healthy, and internationally oriented and focused and exporting. Thank you all so much for your time today. We look forward to seeing you online and offline soon. Drop by our offices anytime soon, coming this way, vaccinated. Be well, take care. Thank you all very much. Bye-bye.